As the Formula One season draws into its final phase, there are some real battles going on up and down the field. And while you might not look back at the battle for 7th in the Constructors' Championship as one of the most exciting in the field, you'd be wrong. It's worth millions and millions of euros. Craig, the battle between AlphaTauri and Haas literally could not be closer.
It is literally neck and neck, isn't it? And they're perhaps not the teams that you would place together in this fight, because you never seem to see them racing on the track at the same time. They all seem to be offset with each other. But as you say, there are points, money, and some restrictions potentially on wind tunnel time going forwards as a result of this fight.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a little more detail, but first I'm going to start with AlphaTauri, because coming into the Japanese Grand Prix, they made some interesting changes to the rear wing of the car. Craig, talk us through this, the little detail change and why it matters.
So the change really is in this top corner of the wing and the cutout that sits behind it. And this is just a very subtle way of affecting the wing and tuning it for different circuits. If you remember, we used to be able to change the whole angle of the wing, but with the regulations, you can't just angle the wing now. You've got to find other ways. So you will be playing with the gurney flap on the back here or the shape here, just to get the downforce and the drag figures out of the wing that you want that match your trackside simulations.
Well, that's quite a subtle change to the rear end of the AlphaTauri, but they made a more fundamental change to the front end at the previous race in Singapore. To take a closer look at that and the car's development overall, Will Buxton caught up with the team's technical director, Jody Eggington.
Jody, a new front wing for you guys. It's a bit of a change in philosophy. Why has it taken so long to make the choice to go with this option?
Yeah, it is a bit of a change in philosophy. There's a lot of work that goes into a wing and a nose. Like a lot of teams, we focused on floor and side pod. This was bubbling away in the background, but we wanted a sensible return from it. We kept finding different directions, so every time we got close to maybe releasing something to the car, we had a different thought, a different idea. So it was a bit delayed, but delayed for performance reasons. So that's good. It's delivered on what we wanted, but yeah, it would have been nice to get it earlier, but the development rate of these cars is so quick that things change fast, and your decision-making process changes and priorities change on a daily basis.
One of the questions which we always have when something changes at the front of the car was, did it have to go through a new front impact test?
No, this one didn't, to be fair to the guys in the DO. The actual crash structures underneath this, what you see there, the majority of it is shrouding. There's an interface between the wing and the structural nose. That was played with, the wing was played with, but the structural part itself is unchanged, therefore we didn't need to re-homologate because there's no impact on crash testing.
Brilliant. Now obviously, this is the point at which the car cuts through the air. Everything that flows, everything that follows from the front wing is directly affected by that front wing. With such a change, have you seen a noticeable change to the airflow going through the floor and to the visible surfaces?
Yeah, to be honest with you, the effect of this wing on the car, we'd already been picking up with previous changes on some elements of front suspension and floor. So the floor was already adapted in this direction with recent updates, and then we've just finished the package off with the front wing, really. So there's not, it's not working independently. We've sort of been heading in this direction for a while in the wind tunnel, and this is sort of a culmination of a rolling development. This is something that we've used a lot in the past, and this final development, or pretty much final development of the year, it sort of finishes off the work we were doing with the floor earlier in the year.
Fascinating. So are there any more major changes to come throughout the year, or is this, as you say, kind of the cherry on the top that completes the cake that you've been building all year?
There'll be nothing else of this size. We're fully focused on next year's car now, but there'll be some bits and bobs, and Mexico will have its usual bits to deal with the ambient conditions there. But no, this is the largest update for the remainder of the year.
Now, Craig, this is a really crucial stage in the battle, because we've seen those upgrades going on to the AlphaTauri, and they had a pretty big upgrade partway through the season. But their bitter rivals, the Haas F1 team, they started the season with a pretty advanced car. That extra wind tunnel time they had for having a pretty rubbish previous season in 2021, where they didn't really develop the car at all, gave them so much more aerodynamic testing with some extra CFD and extra wind tunnel time. They started the season with a super advanced car, but then sort of stopped again.
Yeah, when we first saw that car unveiled, which was the true car, not the render that we saw very early in the pre-season, just lots of little details, the front wing end plate, the floor edge, the rear wing, loads of details that other teams were keeping quite simple. Haas went straight out with a very mature looking car, but as we've seen in previous seasons, their in-season development has been a lot more stunted, and the big update they had with the side pods, which was held back for so long, didn't really deliver that kind of jump in performance that they were perhaps expecting. And as a result, we've kind of seen Haas trail back through the year rather than keeping the pace that they had so much earlier in the season.
And Gunther Steiner had been saying earlier in the season that upgrades are overrated, but in reality, the upgrades are probably what Haas needed. But AlphaTauri's big upgrade package in the middle of the season did seem to be overrated, and were it not for, shall we say, some Ferrari power unit issues for Haas, this picture of 34 versus 34 might be slightly different. But actually, reliability between the two teams is a little bit deceptive, isn't it?
Yeah, I was actually surprised when I looked at the figures. Both teams have got 6 DNFs each, which seems quite fair. And in terms of some of their better results, they're fairly equal as well. So again, exactly the reason they've ended up head to head here, but with such different approaches to their cars, their development rate through the season, and how they choose to go racing.
Well, the two teams seem to have very different performance brackets to each other, so they rarely seem to be battling each other wheel to wheel on track, and actually on strategy they usually seem to be a little bit far apart. But those two teams are both going to be looking at each other as well as the two green Aston Martins, and we'll be taking a closer look at the Aston Martin in future. But that battle for 7th position in the Constructors' Championship is one not to take your eyes off in the closing races of this season.